Europa Universalis V covers 500 years of world history. Over those 500 years, a lot of world-changing events happened, and while you will have a great influence on most of the timeline, some events are important enough that you might see them happen in almost every single game. One of those events is the Italian Wars, involving France, Spain, the Holy Roman Empire, and most of the Italian states. The term Italian Wars refers to a long cycle of conflicts that began when Charles VIII of France invaded Naples and ended with the Treaty of Cateau-Cambrésis, which forced France to abandon its ambitions in Italy. These wars involved not only France and Spain, but also Venice, the papacy, the Swiss cantons, and many Italian states. Italy, fragmented into competing powers, became the main battlefield of Europe for decades, leading to massive political upheavals, tens of thousands of deaths, and the reshaping of European powers. The outcome was the dominance of the Spanish Habsburg monarchy over Europe. Although the wars were central to 16th century history, the expression Italian Wars was not immediately used. Contemporary French sources spoke of voyages, expeditions, and conquests. The notion of a coherent cycle of Italian wars only emerged later, in the late 16th century, with Guicciardini's History of Italy and French historians like Belforest. They framed these wars as part of a broader narrative, the rivalry between France and the Habsburg for European supremacy. From the 17th to the 18th century, French historians increasingly judged these wars as costly and ultimately fruitless for the French crown, portraying them as failures that brought little benefit. In Italy itself, historical writings focused more on local states and ruling families, showing little sense of a unified narrative. The perception shift in the 19th century, with Napoleon's campaign in Italy, comparison to earlier French invasion resurfaced, reviving the memory of the 16th century's war. Historians like Jules Michelet framed the Italian wars at the dawn of the Renaissance and the awakening of modern Europe, linking them to the broader idea of European civilization. From the mid-19th century onwards, the term Italian wars became more common in both France and the rest of Europe, reinforced by new historiography that tied them to themes of culture, diplomacy, and the emergence of modern states. In French schools, during the early 20th century, the wars were presented primarily through patriotic victories, like Fourneau and Marignan, and heroic figures like the knight Bayard. But later generations of historians shifted toward a more social and cultural approach, viewing the Italian Wars as one of Europe's first total conflict, involving wide alliances, heavy costs, and far-reaching consequences. The modern perspective seeks to go beyond the narrow Franco-centric reading. The Italian Wars are now understood as a shared European story, involving a wide range of actors: France, Spain, the Holy Roman Empire, the papacy, Venice, Milan, Florence, the Swiss cantons, and even the Ottoman Empire. These conflicts exemplified a Europe where war was almost a normal state of affairs, driven by clashing ambition and fragile alliances. Today, we'll cover the origin of this conflict, the first war that ignited the spark and started almost 60 years of fighting in the peninsula. In the late 15th century, the Italian peninsula stood at the height of its brilliance. Florence was the beating heart of the Renaissance, where bankers and artists reshaped the idea of beauty and power. Venice ruled the seas, while Milan prospered through trade and fortification, and Naples dominated the fertile south. Yet, for all its wealth and sophistication, there was no unified Italy. Only a constellation of rival states, bound by diplomacy and treachery in equal measure. This division, so long a source of vitality, also made the peninsula vulnerable. Across the Alps, ambitious monarchs in France and Spain looked southward, seeing not a neighbor but an opportunity. The first man who turned this opportunity into action was Charles VIII of France. Barely 24 years old, impulsive, and eager for glory, he inherited from his predecessors a claim to the Kingdom of Naples through the Angevin line. For decades, that claim had been little more than legal curiosity, but Charles, surrounded by advisors hungry for adventure, decided to make it real. His timing was perfect. In 1492, Lorenzo de' Medici, the Magnificent, died, removing the stabilizing figure who had long balanced the rivalries in Italy. Florence drifted into internal crisis. Naples, under Ferran of Aragon, and then his son, Alphonse II, grew aggressive. In Milan, Ludovico Sforza, threatened by Naples and distrustful of his neighbors, made a fatal choice. He invited Charles VIII to bring a French army to Italy, promising passage and support to help him gain control over Genoa. In doing so, Ludovico opened the gate to what would become 65 years of war. In the autumn of 1494, Charles crossed the Alps at the head of around 25,000 men, one of the most formidable forces in Europe. The army combined the best elements of the late medieval and the early modern world: armored cavalry, disciplined Swiss pikemen, and above all, powerful cannons. The result was a revolution for the time. Fortresses that had once withstood sieges for months now crumbled in a matter of days. Italy's city-state, accustomed to limited wars fought by professional mercenaries, found themselves facing a new kind of warfare: fast, destructive, and uncompromising. As the French advanced southward, resistance collapsed. Florence fell into turmoil, while its republic transformed into a theocracy under the sermons of Savonarola. Pisa used this moment to break away from Florence and go under French protection. And finally, Naples, the final objective of the king, weakened by unrest and fear, offered no serious resistance. In February of 1495, Charles VIII entered the city in triumph, greeted by some as liberator, feared by others as an invader. For a brief moment, it seemed that the entire peninsula was about to fall under French control. But the shock of the invasion provoked an immediate and united response. Venice, Milan, and the papacy, usually bitter rivals, joined forces with Ferdinand of Aragon and the Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian I to form the League of Venice, determined to drive the French out of Italy before they consolidated their gains. Charles, aware of the growing danger, began his retreat northward. The confrontation came in July 1495 at Fornovo on the banks of the Taro River. The battle was chaotic, brutal, and indecisive. Both sides actually claimed victory. The French succeeded in breaking through the League's army and saving the artillery, but they had to abandon most of their plunder and their loot. Their hold on Italy was shattered. Charles returned to France, leaving behind a garrison in Naples that quickly fell to the Aragonese. 3 years later, in 1498, he died, killed not in battle, but by an accident in his own castle in Amboise. His campaign had lasted less than 2 years, yet its consequences were enormous. Italy's illusion of security has been destroyed. Its fortresses, mercenary, and its balance of power had all failed. The French invasion showed one thing: the vulnerability of the peninsula that was rich, but divided. And it opened the gates to decades of foreign interventions. The dream of a French kingdom in Naples died with Charles VIII, but the wars he began would continue for the next 60 years. Louis XII, François Ier, Ferdinand of Aragon, Charles V would all turn Italy into the main battlefield of Europe, waging wars that would define the Renaissance age. But for this war and the next, everything will be up to you in Europa Universalis V. In Europa Universalis V, the Italian Wars are represented as a dynamic situation. A situation that doesn't trigger automatically, but only when the right conditions are met. The situation can begin once the age of discovery has started, around 1437. For the next 100 years, any large-scale conflict involving Italy may escalate into the Italian Wars. To trigger it, a great power, a kingdom strong enough, or the Holy Roman Empire must go to war against the state whose capital is in Italy. If no single Italian country already dominates the peninsula, the balance breaks and the situation starts. Once active, the situation divides Europe into leagues. France, Spain, the Holy Roman Empire can all lead their own coalitions, competing for influence into Italy. The Italian states can join these leagues, remain neutral, or try to form their own alliances if they are strong enough. There's no fixed pattern. Every campaign will develop differently. As a player, you can create a league, even if you're in Italy, but these alliances in this conflict are not stable. Being a part of a league does not ensure that you will remain in this league for the rest of the event. During the situation, Europa Universalis V introduced a unique mechanic around mercenaries and condottieri. During this period, Italian states relied heavily on professional soldiers for hire. In the situation, you can encourage condottieri to come to your country. Doing so will allow to temporarily reduce the cost of mercenaries. However, your rivals can do the same, often turning your own allies against you for the next war. This situation will continue until one league grows strong enough to dominate the region. Being strong enough meaning holding more than 200 locations on the Italian peninsula, or until 65 years has passed. After 65 years, the conflict will die of its own. Importantly, the Italian Wars are not guaranteed to appear in every playthrough. Sometimes, the conditions never align. Other times, the entire peninsula becomes a war zone that attracts every single great power in Western Europe. But when the situation does fire, it will reshape the political map for the next 60 years and makes Italy one of the most dynamic regions in the game. Whatever happens, the destiny of Western Europe will be into your hands. And the Italian Wars is not the only situation that will fire across the 500 years that covers Europa Universalis V. Don't forget to subscribe to not miss any more information about Europa Universalis V. My name is Clem, and see you next time for another situation showcase.